Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 19.1 Launch Week and our first webinar, What's New in WinForms, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher and DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknell. In this session, we'll explore our newest WinForms components and features set to ship as part of version 19.1. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later, and we will send the link to the recording in a follow-up email. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. We do have members of the dev team online with us, so they will try and get to all of your questions as best they can. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul and Julian.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Launch Week. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to everybody out there. Welcome, as Paul says, to version 19.1 and the first webinar of what's new in that particular version, or this particular version. Or the version that's going to be released this week.
Starting out with that first question. So we're going to be launching this week, are we, Julian?
In theory, yes. The teams are doing their last-minute tests, including the tests of the build itself. And if nothing goes wrong, we should be seeing it later on. Not today, I hasten to ask. But certainly there's a great possibility of it being available, say Wednesday. How about that?
We're going to hold you to that. And we're also going to, it is the start of a fresh week. We have obviously launched the webinars, and we've also been having some interesting internet issues here down under. So hopefully we're going to be stress-free for the rest of the presentation.
I do hope so.
Now, last week, Julian, you were actually at the Microsoft Build Conference. So let's kick off, since we're talking platforms, about what news or what is new coming out of Microsoft.
So with regard to WinForms, I think the news, as it were, is pretty direct and hasn't changed very much. .NET Core 3 is being worked on. The release date for that is estimated to be September, at least with the people I talked to. So it's still in a preview mode or a beta mode at the moment. In theory, you could take a WinForms application and recompile it to target .NET Core 3 as is at the moment, and it should just work. The one thing I did not know, but I was told by one of the lead developers on the WinForms Designer team, is that they're still working on the WinForms Designer. There is an awful lot to do to make it work inside Visual Studio 2019 for .NET Core 3. So presumably that work is going to finish as well in September. So you won't be able to do any WinForms designing inside Visual Studio 2019. So be warned. Well, not until September, but be warned. Other than that, on the other side of things, we were finally told that ASP.NET Web Forms is no longer going to be supported with .NET Core 3 or ASP.NET Core 3. So be warned if you're doing those kind of web applications, or we have some legacy web applications. But that's not the subject of this particular webinar. And as Paul has shown, we have a lot to get through. So without further ado, I'd say.
The key thing I wanted to add to that part of the conversation, Julian, was the fact that WinForms is still going to be around for a long time.
Oh, yes.
We put a lot of emphasis in that each time that we do one of these releases, but WinForms is definitely still a premium platform of choice. Now, as you can see from this list, there are a lot of things that have been touched in version 19.1. Some would be seen as minor enhancements, others quite major enhancements, and we'll start getting through the list. As we started with the 18.2 webinars, we've separated WPF out, so today is just going to be focused on WinForms. And there may be some elements that are covered on our cross-platform presentations. So, for example, charting, dashboarding, reporting has its own webinar later on this week. The other thing is a lot of the stuff I'll be covering is also expressed inside some of the blog posts. So if you're not familiar with that, head on over to community.devexpress.com/blogs, where you will get some really cool in-depth write-ups about some of the functionality that we're delivering in this release. Well, let's start by jumping into the applications. Now, I'm using the version 19.1 beta that we released a few weeks ago. I've been running this since the day of release. I'm using the same version that's available to anybody that's got a subscription and access to that beta product. So it's been really quite stable. I've been running a number of different platforms and having a lot of fun with it. What we're going to start out with is looking at the data grid, and in particular some of the functionality that's been added into the Find panel. All the demos I'll be running today, or majority of the demos, are coming straight from the demo center. I've already started the WinForms main menu system behind there, and here we've got the data grid demo running. When we scroll down, I'm going to find the Find panel demo here. And what we can see on the right-hand side, which is the area we're going to be focused on, is these options for search behavior. In version 18.2 and earlier, the default parser was actually something called mixed. And this is where the grid itself would break the words that you type into the search panel into separate words and then use an OR operator on them. So you type certain things, it would go, oh, this word appears here, or it can appear here. Now, we had a number of people raise questions asking whether this is the best default behavior. And it's not that the default OR was wrong, but it was more a question of how you use the filter panel. For example, if you were to type Italy, Germany, and Spain, so values, different values from the same data column, OR is going to work fine. But if you were to type something like sales, Maria, and Germany, you're actually wanting another operator because you wanted to combine some of those values. At the end of the day, it all boils down to how you want the behavior to work for you or your users. But in 19.1, you get full control of that Find panel. The parser kind option, as I drop that down, allows you to choose which operator the Find panel should use. So the default operator is now AND. So if I was to choose default, it would be the same as choosing AND. We can see that if I was to then select that and start typing in here, so we can go marketing and moves. And we're not going to find any match because the Hannah Moves record isn't a marketing manager, therefore the AND expression there is going to come through. If we type in marketing in France, we're going to start seeing those direct matches on that default. The key thing here, Julian, is that you can now control that parser information a lot better, a lot more condensedly inside your application. Now, the second thing that I want to highlight here is the filter condition. And this one specifies how the data grid actually compares the cells in the value to the Find panel strings. Again, the modes are pretty self-explanatory. We've got contains, starts with, like, and equal. If we were to set starts with and we type in an, obviously it's only going to return matching entries where ANN is at the beginning of the word. But one of the things you can do is, if we use like, is implement the wildcard parameter. So I could do something such as %, which is the wildcard AN, and it's only going to match records where AN is at the end of the word. If I wanted to make that a little bit easier, say manager, and I can crash my GoToWebinar. Switch back out and load that up again, hey?
Okay.
Doesn't matter how many practices we do, Julian, sometimes we just
I
press
wish to
the
reassure
right
everyone that during our rehearsals, this did not happen. So
button.
this is
Not
kind of
once.
intriguing.
The next thing that I want to then demonstrate inside the grid control is the animation. Now, hopefully that's rendering correctly and doing all what it's supposed to be doing at that point.
It is indeed.
In essence, what we're seeing here is the conditional format animate based on a change to a cell. And there's two things at play here. What I'm going to do is just come through and bring up the conditional formatting rules dialog. And we'll see that we've got, first of all, the data bar, which is what we're seeing in the reds and greens. I'll double click and you can set the different formatting rules up here. And obviously you've got some pretty granular control over what's happening in the bars themselves. The other thing that you'll notice in the prior dialog is this other option showing a data update. And this is where you can specify how long an animation is going to be applied for based on different rule types. So we see here that we only want to format the changing values on an increase for a time of 500 milliseconds. There's no cell icon involved in the column that I selected. And again, you've got the quick option to select your formats. So look down at the low dollars, find one that has an icon change. And we can see we can pick an icon as well as the format rules themselves. The other options through here, you can see that you can apply the format change to the row, to the entire row, or specifically to a column and have it stop if another condition is met. If you've got customers who are working with a data grid where this kind of visualization is effectively going to draw your eyes directly to changes that are happening in a nice, non-stark, what would Mark Miller say? Less cognitive load as things are going on. I had to throw that one in there. At the, I love that phrase, cognitive load.
Indeed, your eyes are drawn to the changes in essence, and they fade away. So yeah.
Without being a stark flash or something that's that's happening there. Now, charting, as I mentioned, we will be covering in depth inside the reporting dashboards and charting webinar, which is on later this week. The next thing that I want to look at are diagrams. And to do this, I'm going to run up the main diagram control demo. The feature I want to show you, we can see best on the database diagram. Now here we can see a typical layout of tables along with their relationship lines that have been drawn in. You'll notice on the actual header of each of these elements, we've now got the collapse icon. And if I choose collapse on each of these or any of these, we'll see that not only is the panel collapsed, but then the connection lines or the links are also then hidden, making it a lot easier to navigate around and simplify what can sometimes be quite a complex diagram.
Indeed, this is a very, quote, simple database schema, and the ability to basically collapse those tables you're not interested in at the moment just so you can see the connectors between the tables you are interested in is a great new feature.
The other thing that made it onto the diagram feature list is the ability to export directly to PDF. Next on my hit list is going to be the picture edit control. Now, Julian and I actually had some discussions on this during our rehearsal times, and he doesn't share my sentiment, but I think this is an absolute fantastic update to the picture edit. So I'm going to launch the picture edit demo. Now, it could be that you're working, well, there's lots of reasons why I think this is a cool feature. Basically, inside the image editor, I'm going to invoke the image editor dialog, and we've now got the ability to do some basic graphic editing on this control. Now, it's not designed to be Paint, Photoshop, whatever your favorite hardcore image editor actually is. But what it does allow you to do is perform some of the most popular tasks, such as you can rotate the image. That's a straight 90-degree rotation. You can mirror the image. You've got some controls over contrast, brightness, and saturation, as well as desaturation to make the image black and white. But I particularly like the crop feature. And inside the crop feature, I can control my crop window. So I can control the size of my crop window, whether the aspect ratio is maintained when I do that. And I love the fact that, this is I think Julian laughs at me over, I can change the angle of what I'm actually doing here. And when I'm done, I can save that back through to my image object. So you've got the ability of adding some basic image editing directly into your application. And sorry, Julian, I love it.
No, I think it's pretty good for those simple scenarios where your user wants to, I don't know, mess around with images of your products or something along those lines and put them in a grid and all that kind of stuff.
The one that quickly jumps to mind for me is profile manipulation. So you're editing your profile, you want to upload your bio picture, and you just want to change it around a little, especially the crop and things like that. You just want to change around, maybe reduce the colors a little. I don't know. I think it's a cool feature. Anyway, that's fine. Moving on to the filtering UI changes. What you'll notice on this particular demo is that there's some visual element changes, some new visual styles are being displayed inside the filter panel. And it's more like a breadcrumb now. So not only do we have the colors representing the differences between fields, operators, and values, but you can also see as I hover over, you've got this little collection of those fields, and I can use the mouse to quickly remove one of those filters if I want. This is extended into the actual filter panel. So if I click on Edit Filter, we can see that we've got that visual change here as well. If I come through and add a new filter, and this time I'll choose Discount, I'll drop down my list of operators or operands, and you'll notice at the very bottom we've got this thing called a custom function. Now this is something that you can implement yourself. So obviously a Black Friday discount is not something we ship out of the box for obvious reasons. And when I select the Black Friday discount, it's going to be added in here, click OK, and then my filter has been applied. As I mentioned before, if I use my mouse, I can get rid of that out of my breadcrumb list. But what's also important is the Excel-inspired filters that we implement from these drop-downs here. It's automatically added as an option inside here. So I can very quickly apply it at that point. Now that in itself is handled really simply by you implementing or handling the query custom functions event, and also making sure that the show custom functions setting is enabled within options filter. So that allows some more, I think I'll use a Julian word and say groovy filtering.
Actually, I do like the fact that if you bring up that filter dialog again, in other words, edit filter, notice that the model price there, you're defining the filter as being greater than or equal to 25,000 and also less than or equal to 80,000, but we translate that inside the filter row there as being the model price from 25 to 80,000. So it's more legible, easier to understand than all of those mathematical operators. Kind of cool.
And the colors definitely make it easier to see what's going on inside your filter row. Okay, we've done Finder Panel highlights, custom filters, and let's take a look at layout and navigation. Microsoft release a new version of their major products once every year or once every couple of years. And with that, they usually bring through some UI elements that customers jump straight onto us and say, hey, can we see that inside our application? So the team diligently worked behind the scenes to make that happen so that when Microsoft released the product, that you've got the option of bringing that functionality forward to your customer as well. So what we're going to do is take a look at the docking demo. And here I want to look in particular at the Visual Studio Inspired demo. This, in VS 2019, Microsoft have basically said, hey, the title bar is a waste of space. We want to save those 20 odd pixels or whatever it is and utilize the title bar along with a menu bar or a toolbar. So you can now do that, and we can see from this particular demo, and this is a great example project to look at, by the way, in how to implement something like a Visual Studio clone with all these different panels. So you've got the toolbox with drag and drop functionality. You've got all of the windows that we're used to seeing inside a Visual Studio. Whilst this demo at the moment uses just menu items on this top bar, you'll notice that it is the top bar. It's where the title used to be. And you can put any type of editor in there, whether it's a button, a static text item, or any editor. And the idea simply is that it's creating more space-efficient UIs, giving the user less waste space on their screen.
In fact, that's kind of interesting because it came up several times during my sessions at the booth. Somebody would come up to us and say, you know, why do I need your controls and all that kind of stuff? And I was basically saying, your users are used to using Microsoft products. They're used to using Outlook. They're used to using Word and Excel and all that kind of stuff. And I was basically trying to point out that our controls are built so that you can replicate that kind of look and feel and usability and experience inside your own applications. And this is yet another example of that. Obviously, I'm going to guess your users don't use Visual Studio, but they'll certainly get used to the fact that, oh, yeah, I'm saving space and I know what's going on. I don't really need to know the title of my application at the moment, but you know, having the menu up there or some editors or a search bar or whatever it is in the title bar is a great new feature.
And that's what's going to happen with Office. We're going to see that transition through there where the title bar becomes part of that, or the title becomes part of that top menu. Mm-hmm. I've jumped over into Visual Studio here, and I've just created a DevExpress template gallery project. I'm sitting on WinForms, Visual C#, and if you haven't been into the template gallery for a while, it's certainly worth a look. There's lots of great starting points into different styles of applications. Today all I'm interested in is the blank application, and I'm going to choose Create Project. Once the project's created, what I'm focusing on is actually inside the project settings. So right click on the context menu on the project, down to the DevExpress project settings, and invoke that dialog. What you'll notice here is that we now have a compact UI option that we can apply to our project. What does that actually look like? Well, I've got a couple of slides to help elaborate. Here's a screenshot of the data grid demo page with the compact view not enabled, and if we then take a look at the same page with it enabled, you'll notice, and I'll just toggle between those two for a second, you'll notice that there are many extra lines visible to the UI by choosing that compact view. If you're a web developer, it's effectively stealing some of the padding. Julian, we have a debate on this.
We have a debate on lots of things, Paul. This is something that has come up before with some of our customers, especially in the financial arena, whereby they have traders essentially, they want to see as much information on the screen as they can. And with grids, that tends to be as many rows as you can stuff in there and as many columns and all that kind of stuff. And this compact view is geared towards that. You know, it's removing the padding, removing the white space to a certain extent so that although you can still visually see the individual rows and the individual columns, especially in the grid, we're basically trying to get much information, as much of your data on the screen as is possible. And it's,
without you having to go in and sort of mess around with the styles on every element. That's the key thing.
Yeah. So compact view is for those cases where your users need as much data on the screen as possible.
Switching back to the project settings menu, I want to also show you another cool thing in version 19.1. I nearly said 19.2 then, Julian. Dropping down the skin name, I'm going to select the Bezier, and you'll notice that...
Bezier, Paul, Bezier. It's a French word.
You say tomato, I say tomato. We have the edit feature next to the skin palette name. So I click edit, and now what you can see is the palette editor directly inside your project. You no longer have to worry about launching a separate skin editor, distributing separate DLLs. There's no more hard coding palettes without seeing actual results. Everything that you're working with is directly inside the element. So if we go through here, I can say paint, I can say I want this brush color, and I want this accent paint and accent brush. So we can see straight away how cool my application is going to look.
Paul, I would stick with development. Graphics designer, I think you've got a little bit to learn. At least you're showing the at least you're showing the feature, but oh boy, don't change your day job yet.
So the point is you get to control every element of the palette directly inside your project. No more messing around. I'm going to jump now across to the layout controls. Now, a lot of people use the automatic form layout control, or they use the layout control when working with large UIs and large applications. In version 19.1, we've got a couple of new controls inside this space. We've got the stack panel and we've got the table panel. Effectively, the stack panel is something that was inspired by the WPF stack panel container, and it allows you to arrange panels of all the children in a single column or row. So this layout of a login box will be a great example of that, where elements are stacked one on top of the other. In the demo, you can come along and you can play around with this. You can drag any of these elements and position them wherever you want on the screen. So I can put this down under here, and I've got a button which I can set some properties for. The same principle goes for the table panel, but it means you've got a little bit more control, because as with its web counterpart, you've got a grid effectively where each cell can host a control. The grid supports columns and different row spans, meaning that a single control can occupy 7 consecutive cells. It also supports 3 different sizing models, being absolute, relative, and auto size. These are great controls where you want that little bit extra flexibility on where your elements are going to go without having to go to the full-on layout, automated layout control tools. Now we've looked at the compact editing. We would also have updates to the layout control with the acrylic effect support. The control now supports the acrylic accent, which is partial transparency, when placed on a DevExpress form. But of course, that applies to Windows 10 users only. We've also got the 2019 Office ribbon enhancement. So let's jump over to, I'm thinking the simple ribbon pad would be a good demo for this. Again, we talked about some of the UI things that Microsoft have implemented, and one of them is this search functionality. So here we've got a search bar, and as I start typing, we're going to see all of the elements available from the menus and or ribbon containers. Now that's particularly useful, I was talking to Julian earlier about it, if you're using a product not so frequently, and I think your example, Julian, was PowerPoint.
Yeah, PowerPoint. Every time I use PowerPoint, which is probably once every 6 months, I forget where options are in the menu system, where options are in the ribbons, and all that kind of stuff. And the search item here basically says, I know I'm looking for font or format or whatever it is, so typing FO, I suddenly get to the right place. I don't have to go searching through, is it in the design thing or in the, is it ever here? Yeah, you don't have to go searching. You can just start typing in what you think the command is, or at least the menu option name is, and find it pretty well immediately.
Absolutely. Let's scoot over and take a look at the map control. Now, mapping is one of those products that applies across multiple platforms, but we'll just jump in and take a look at some of the features that affect WinForms. Maximize the demo. And I do apologize that maps will render a little slower over GoToWebinar. So you now have the ability, WinForms only feature, the ability to specify a custom zoom step. You now can export item attributes when you export to KML, and you can now export items to a WKT format. The map editor now includes a new notification event to allow tracking executed actions during map shape edit operations. That's a mouthful. And also the ability to cancel an item creation. What you're seeing on screen at the moment is the example of the map shape simplification algorithm. Now basically what we can see here is you can simplify a very highly detailed vector shape before displaying it on the map. And if we change this tolerance, let's take it off auto and bring this tolerance down, you can see that rather than, it all comes down to number of points and tolerance when fitting into
So in other words, you're displaying some kind of map, and you're not really interested in showing the user every single inlet. This is Iceland, for example, every single inlet, just a broad shape that somebody would recognize as being Iceland will work just beautifully for your particular application, for your particular need, for your particular data exploration for the user. So obviously the quote lower tolerance, if you like, the fewer points you're using to display the map renders more quickly and still gives that kind of information that you want the user to see.
And then you've got the ability of using shapes with custom images. So you can set georeferenced raster images as a map's polygon background. And the map control can show these images together with map tiles provided by either Bing or OpenStreetMap. So here, the example, as I zoom in, is actually showing Central Park as an image on top of the Central Park or the New York map. Interesting place to visit, Julian.
Central Park, yeah, I've been a couple of times. Or New York, yeah, I've been several times.
Both, loved my time there. PDF Viewer. PDF Viewer now supports predefined CMaps for CRD font support. In essence, there's a set of characters or a set of fonts that were pretty specialized. Using the DirectX rendering, we can now support the CJK character mapping. One thing that's common through a lot of the demonstrations for version 19.1 is we have now released, because previously it was a CTP thing, but the skinned save and open file dialogues. And it's something, we talked about it last time, it's an interesting concept. Instead of just seeing the Microsoft standard Windows dialog, if you've got a fully themed application, you can now utilize our dialogues inside that. So I'm going to show you something in the spreadsheet anyway. I'll just open this up and I'm going to change my skin to DevExpress Dark. And then if I open File Open, we're going to see that dialog, and I chose Dark specifically because it's the simplest one to show the stark difference between standard and now. But that applies to the Open and Save As dialogs. So we did talk once before, Julian, that in itself was not just a simple task.
No, and the standard dialogues, you have to basically circumvent them and repeat them or regenerate them if you like. So it's not a simple. Just think of all those applications you're using at the moment where you do something and then it suddenly says, "Do you want to save?" And it's just the standard dialogue from Windows, and it just looks bizarre sometimes.
Bizarre indeed. Spreadsheet control. There are a number of things going on with the spreadsheet control in this update. Let's start with the simplified formula creation. So I'm going to come to the bottom of our list here, and I'm a bit of a keyboard guy, so as I start typing equals sum, I can now not have to touch the mouse, and boom, there's my formula straight with using keyboard. So you can use cell ranges now from other worksheets, as well as selecting cells with a keyboard when you edit or create formula. Now, the spreadsheet actually has a new layout calculation engine. It provides improvement in the layout accuracy, it increases the render and scroll performance, as well as enhancing print capabilities. Now, if for any reason you find you need to switch back to the legacy version, there is a flag that is Enable Legacy Layout Engine. In the compatibility options, you just simply toggle that back on. Although, I'm not sure why you would need to, since the new one provides so much more functionality. We've also added the ability to do multi-threaded calculations. So both the control itself and the API support the use of multi-threads. You can nominate the actual number of threads themselves via the calculation options thread count property. And if you want to or need to, you can disable the multi-threaded option again just by turning off the enable multi-thread option in the calculation options. We've brought across a number of Excel 2016 functions, including concat, text join, if switch, max ifs, and min ifs. So they're now supported by both the control and the API. The spreadsheet control now supports rich text within worksheet cells, which can also be printed or exported directly to a PDF, although that is only when you use controls that support the new layout engine. And another quick mention here, Julian, you can export or you can print your spreadsheet document to black and white.
Excellent. Mind you, I do like the equals sum and then you're just using the keyboard. I do that all the time in Excel, I must admit, so I'm glad we've added that.
I've got to say, I generally do this though and forget to actually move off the cell I'm editing and end up with a circular reference.
It's recursion, man. It's recursion.
There, finally, with spreadsheet is the calculation engine is now about 5 times faster. That's right, 5-fold speed increase on the calculation engine, as well as improvements in insert delete operations where you've got a lot of merged cells, things. So in other words, the team have just been, again, working endlessly to squeeze as much performance as possible out of these different things. The tree list control also got to the benefits of the updated search panel. The tree list control also supports the filter mode and the scroll bar annotations. I was going to say indicators, but scroll bar annotations is what I'm looking for. And just looking through my list here, the vertical grid has got DirectX support. I think just about most of our controls now have DirectX support, don't they, Julian?
It's a very important technology, and obviously when WinForms was first designed and built, it just supported GDI and GDI Plus. The DirectX support means or gives your WinForms applications a much better and faster, and the whole of the positives for rendering on your 4K screens and all that kind of stuff. It's very important, and we're first with it, and it's great.
Great. Scheduler control, 3 versions in a row for this magnificent control. So in this version 19.1, one of the key things that I'm going to highlight, there's some nice stuff happening. You can now sort by category or group by category, or sort by resource, group by resource. But one thing that I want to highlight here, if I go to my full week view, is something called what do we call it? Time regions. That's the word I was looking for. Time
I was
regions.
just looking at Vegas, baby. I think our developers have a good sense of humor sometimes when they're inventing these demos.
Oh, what would you have on your calendar if you were going to go to Vegas, Julia? I'd certainly have Vegas, baby. Anyway, back onto time regions. We can see in this view that we've got Sunday and Saturday as a different color, for want of a better word, as well as this lunch period across the screen represented with this knife and fork. I want you to think about time regions effectively as a unique, or it works in the same way as an appointment, but it's each with a unique user restriction. You can't add appointments to this area or modify appointments that are already there. Inversely, if the schedule is disabled for editing, you can unlock specific cells with the help of time regions. So it's giving you even more control over what's going on at that element level of your scheduler. Now, the time regions are fully customizable. They work in the same fashion as appointment. You can set start and end dates. You can add optional recurrence patterns. You can see here that every weekend is going to be the Saturday, Sunday time region. Every lunch is going to be that recurring pattern. You can also see that we've got custom painting happening with that lunchtime iconography that's in there. And you can also specify the owner resource so that the regions only affect appointments for that specific resource. So again, it sounds complex, but a lot of functionality that's been delivered inside that control. Other things with the scheduler control, just looking through, as I mentioned, the sort and grouping appointments using custom algorithms. The timeline view, you can remove time intervals. We touched on the palette editor before, Julian. What I also want to do is look at SVG icons. I am conscious of time as well. So, over to Visual Studio, and if you're using Visual Studio 2019, you can get to the DevExpress menu from the extensions menu. Obviously, in earlier versions, it sits along top with everything else. I'm going to come down to all platforms and run the SVG Icon Builder tool. Now, for those that aren't familiar with it, it's a great way to create your own SVG icons. And I'd be remiss, just 1 second, if I didn't mention, I'll bring up the browser demo. If I didn't mention one thing that was one of the most highly requested and long-awaited feature, Julian, is the ability for support of gradient fills in SVG icons. You can hear the crowd going wild. So it is SVG icons. We were supporting, obviously, SVG. We didn't have support for linear or gradient fills inside those icons, which, as shown in this demo with the social media icons, we do now. Switching back to the SVG Icon Builder, If you're not familiar with this tool, basically you just drag in your icon and then you can put some adorning elements on there. So it'd be like, yay, there's my favorite tick, done. One of the things that we've added support for now is custom icon support. So what I can do is I can come along to my library setting. I can choose to add a folder, and here's one I created earlier. What you'll notice is the icon builder said, hey, the folder you've told me about already contains subfolders. Do you want to add them as subfolders, or do you want to add them all into one directory as whole? So I'm going to say, no, I want them as individual folders, please. Now, this isn't just a matter of pointing the tool at a bunch of other images. Sometimes the SVGs you're working with don't blend well with the way that our products do. And that could mean the ratio on sizing. It could also mean colors. So for example, if they're using an RGB palette or part of the RGB spectrum that doesn't work well with some of our skins. So what the SVG Icon Builder can do is actually replace those colors and also resize the icons as necessary to play well with the DevExpress components. So that in itself is pretty cool. We can see that I've added all these elements in. So now I'm going to go back to my icon SVG. I'm going to create a brand new one. And this time, if I use my little toolbox here, we can see that the icons that I've pointed to are actually showing inside here. So I can say, oh, I've got a smart house. I'll bring in my Wi-Fi symbol. I can recolor that icon, and then I can add any adorner that I want, place it where I want, and color that in. So now I'm going to cut the Wi-Fi from the house to stop the kids using it at night.
An interesting example there, Paul, I'd say.
You said I had no design skills, Julian.
Obviously I was wrong.
Never mind. So that's the functionality with the SVG Icon Builder. I think one of the things to mention there as well is quite often if we're not using some of these tools all the time, we forget they're there. So check out some of the things inside the DevExpress menu controls where the next time you're playing around. Sunburst control we'll talk more about. Well, with the sunburst control we've added 2 new label layouts. We've added the horizontal label and the tangent label. Tree list I touched upon with the scroll bar annotations, as well as some of the find and filter functionality that was brought in from the grid control. Vertical grid DirectX support. There's a new transition effect if you're using the DirectX based transition effects, which is there's a great demo available on GitHub showing how to use the zoom in effect. And as always, there are a bunch of smaller elements that just become too numerous just to try and get through all of them. But there's some new data deserialization enhancements to reduce vulnerability risks. There's thick form borders, so you can now alter your main form elements between thin and thick borders, which removes shadows and does other cool things. There's the one thing I do want to show is the rich text edit. So let's go in here and look for the word processing demo. I nearly forgot this one, Julian.
It's a
a
big deal for some of our customers. Let's put it like that. Yeah.
So here we are looking at a East Asian language character set document that has special formatting laid out for it. What does this mean? Well, when we're dealing with right to left languages, there's a number of other elements that it's not just a matter of displaying everything in right to left. And we can see here for East Asian and Arabic languages, the rich text edit now supports justified and distributed alignment. What do I mean by that? If I highlight the document and you can see if I turn the alignment off versus on. What basically happens is special characters or characters with tone and vowel markers get extra space between them. There's also another number of RTL related improvements. For example, we adjust line numbering depending on the text direction. We invert the orientation of several ribbon commands, such as alignment, indents, and lists, if RTL is selected. But of course, these functions are only available if you have got the language pack installed. And yes, I do have the Thai language pack installed. I almost had it default to my default language when starting up Windows, which would have been really bad for today. The other thing I want to call out inside the rich text, rich edit control is that your users can now work with encrypted files. So you've got the ability of opening encrypted files, and you can encrypt a file with a password, which you can use either standard or agile encryption, which can be selected inside the code. I'm thinking, Julian, that that's probably time to switch over to questions.
Okay, there's been several questions, and the team have been answering some of them. Let's see. To be honest, I'm not really sure. Look, we got. So Cody says picture edit is an absolute must. I love the fact that DevExpress has made it. Cool. Thank you, Cody. What else have we got? Anything that's not been answered yet. Problem is,
maybe we can answer or recap some of the ones that have been answered then, so that people who may not have seen it.
So can the picture edit control handle multi-page TIFF images, says Sean, and the answer is we only display the first image of a multi-page TIFF. You'd have to implement some kind of navigation to manually navigate through all of the TIFF pages. So the function in the filter editor is valid to using code in C# with specific conditions. Answer is yes, you can implement your own filter function using C#.
Gustavo asked when we're planning to launch, which you sort of touched on at the beginning of the presentation.
Basically, we're hoping to launch this week, which is why we're doing all these webinars this week. The teams are basically doing their last-minute tests and obviously tests with the build to make sure it works. Obviously, we're targeting Visual Studio 2019 as well, so there's that. So yeah, look for it this week. If it's not, then many apologies. Something went wrong. We shall see. What else have we got? Is the Office API going to support .NET Core? Obviously, yes. .NET Core 3. When it is released in September, we're going to be making sure all of our stuff works with .NET Core 3. And we're talking WinForms, and as I said at the beginning of the webinar, WinForms is supported in .NET Core 3. So if you're stuck, just wait till September when Microsoft release it.
The questions are coming thick and fast now. So we have a question about defaulting the font to a Arial bold font in a WinForms project. So if we take a look at the project settings screens, you can change the default font options here and actually specify a custom font that you want for your project at this point. So that hopefully answers the question. Of course, don't forget the DevExpress support team is world renowned, and if you have questions on technical stuff, raise a ticket and the team have a phenomenal response time. Are we going to be supporting the Office 2019 black theme, Anthony? I'm not sure. That's maybe one of the team can jump in. Questions, Julian. Yeah. Questions.
Okay, will there be more functions added to the picture edit? Asked Sean. To which I can only say, duh, yes, but you'll have to wait till 90.2 and 20.1 and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, we're not in the business of writing Photoshop. Let's put it like that. So don't go for the more esoteric things, but certainly the one thing I was talking about earlier with Paul was a resizing ability to resize your images, not crop them. So there's that, and obviously the more esoteric type things, probably not, but we'll see. We just want to see whether people like the picture edit, are going to use the picture edit, and so on. So if you have some feedback, please let us know. support@devexpress.com.
Would you recommend the move to SVG icons in your WinForms application?
Yes, for sure. Here am I. I've got 3 4K screens, and WinForms with 4K, by default is not very good. So use SVG icons. I cannot emphasize this enough. I've been using SVG icons now in my web projects, and to have them in WinForms is just the best thing. You don't have to worry about what resolution screens your customers are using, whether they've got, the font setting to 150 or 200 or whatever. Don't worry about it. Just use SVG and it'll look good.
The question was, can we use the controls in a C++ managed code environment, or they're only valid for C# and VB?
I haven't a clue. I don't know. Maybe the team can jump in. It's not something that I've ever thought about or worried about.
Fair enough. So what we would do with some of these questions, and Julian, is you'll write them up as a blog post?
I doubt it. I'm rather busy this week, and I'm away at a conference next week. So just like Build, unfortunately, I'm going to be fairly busy. So it's your job, Paul. Well done.
I love it. Obviously, coming up this week, we have ASP.NET webinars. We've got the DevExtreme. We've got the dashboard reporting and charting.
And
we have
WPF.
Code Rush. We've got the WPF. So it's a fairly busy week when it comes to presentations.
Indeed. So I think Amanda can jump in and let everyone know.
Yes, I can. Thanks for that segue, Julian.
Uh-huh.
All right, everybody. Like I did mention before, today's webinar will be made available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. We will also get a follow-up email with a link, with links to all of our launch webinar recordings. And like Paul just mentioned, we do have several webinars coming up this week for 19.1, ASP.NET, WPF, dashboards, reporting and analytics, DevExtreme, and Code Rush. You can register now at devexpress.com/webinars. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.